So we're hearing the story of Priscilla Wakefield, a frankly underappreciated financial revolutionary who, at the end of the 18th century, founded this pioneering penny bank that I gather was hugely popular, right? And not just with the women and the orphans that it was originally set up for.
So she does write in her journal, and goodness, did Priscilla keep a detailed journal?
Great for us, though, right?
That's right. So by the end of 1798, the year that she first sets up this bank, she's writing that it's exceeded her expectations. And, at the end of the year, she writes that it has, it had been really hard work. She'd spent most of the year working on this bank, but that it had become, so successful, and it had given her immense pleasure. And she felt that it was very much a model that could be copied, by other people throughout the country in order to broaden access to financial markets for ordinary people.
Amazing. So that's basically, financial inclusion at work. And in fact, it was so successful, as I understand it, that although the bank was set up for women, men started to ask if they could join it too, didn't they?
Exactly. So, perhaps this is one of those rare examples where, men have been discriminated against in financial history.
Why don't people write more about that? Us poor men, we've struggled for so long unrecognized.
Because what we've got to remember is, at this time, ordinary people, regardless of their gender, were really excluded from the banking system. And that's because, the average private bank didn't think that it could make much money from ordinary people's savings. And so they had quite high minimum deposit requirements that, the average person just wouldn't have been able to meet. So there was a wider problem, really, when it came to the banking system. And so when men came knocking on her door saying, "Hey, hang on a moment, Mrs. Wakefield, we want bank accounts too. Will you take our savings?" Then she duly obliged, and she extended her accounts to ordinary men.
So you created essentially a co-ed bank, which is fascinating.
That's right.
But what I think is so interesting, it clearly, it was a fantastic success story. And then people, as they quite often are wont to do, will copy success. Like they started spreading. Other people set up these sort of penny banks, right? There's one in 1810, I think it was, the Reverend Henry Duncan created a Scottish one because he wanted to encourage thrift among the poor. So he accepted deposits as low as, 6p or something?
Yeah, that's right. And that was in a largely rural community in Scotland where you had a lot of, agricultural labourers and cottagers. And again, he had a view that when it comes to saving, it's the pennies that make pounds. And so if you widen access to banking to ordinary people, you can actually achieve a great deal. Now, interestingly, he has gone down in many accounts as the founder of savings banks. But really, I think Priscilla Wakefield deserves that title. I think what the Reverend got right was that he was a great marketeer. So boy, did he talk about his bank and spread knowledge of his bank and spread, banking rules that he felt, other people could copy. And he set this kind of clear public goal that he wanted a bank similar to his own in every parish in Scotland.
I mean, so often women get written out of history, even when they've had the brilliant ideas first, or are providing some of the key breakthroughs and support. But Priscilla didn't just stop at the bank, though. She had a much wider vision later on about how she wanted to change the world of finance, didn't she?
So she did so much behind the scenes. She was a one-woman wonder. She co-founded a school of industry for girls so that, relatively underprivileged girls could be taught, technical skills through which they could get better jobs. And she also set up what I think is probably one of the earliest pension schemes for women. And she also did that in the 1790s. And she provided really a system through which ordinary women could make regular deposits into their pension. And then once they reached the age of 65, they were entitled to a shilling a week. And if they reached the age of 70, they were entitled to 2 shillings a week. And do you know, if we adjust that for what's happened to incomes since, then that would be the equivalent of about 2/3 of the state pension today. And this was in the 1790s, so well before there was the state pension. There was Priscilla Wakefield's pension scheme for women.
Was there anything like this for women at the time? Or is this the very first of its kind?
Certainly, it's the first documented example that I've seen. I mean, there are, interestingly, other examples throughout history in different parts of the world of women, including, for example, nuns on the Silk Road, setting up similar type schemes for women in the Far East. So there is a long history to this.
Wow, Gillian, I think like the Buddhist women along the Silk Roads, that sounds like a future episode to me, to be honest.
Definitely. It's very much my territory because we do a lot of Silk Road studies here at Cambridge. But
yeah. I thought it was anthropology friendly, basically.
Absolutely, yes. But what about what's happening over in America at this time? Because there's quite a lot of examples of similar ideas starting to bubble up on the other side of the pond, aren't there?
Yeah, so I would say Maggie Lena Walker was really the equivalent of Priscilla Wakefield on the other side of the Atlantic. So she was born in the 1860s. She was the daughter of a former enslaved woman. And so she had actually a much less privileged background than Priscilla Wakefield did. But nevertheless, she also went on to do similar things. So setting up, pension schemes and saving schemes for the underserved African American community in the US. And in fact, she went on to become the first woman in the US to charter a bank. She did that in 1903, and it was called the St. Luke's Penny Savings Bank. And then we also have another of my favourite women from financial history, Hetty Green. Now, she came from a relatively middle-class background and was also a Quaker, like Priscilla Wakefield. And, one of my favourite stories about Hetty Green is that when she was a teenage girl, she was sent to New York to be a debutante. And her parents gave her a pot of money to spend on clothes and parties. And instead, she invested it in bonds. And she came home, not with a husband.
That's amazing.
But with a small fortune. And from that point, she went on to invest. She invested in bonds, in real estate, in railways, and she eventually became the richest woman in the US, the first female tycoon in the US. I mean, she would be worth the equivalent of, $1 billion or more today. She was known as the Witch of Wall Street. I personally think she'd be better known as the Queen of Wall Street.
Just goes to show you don't need to get a husband to get ahead. I mean,
Yeah.
And of course,
Gillian, I think we have some episodes here that we can do in the future.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I'd like to know more about her.
Hetty Green, what was her financial strategy? What made her such a great investor? How did she do it, basically?
Oh, well, didn't everyone want to know the secret of her success? So in fact, a reporter asked her exactly that question at the time. And she replied, and I'll quote, "I buy when things are low and nobody wants them. I keep them until they go up and people are crazy about them. This, I believe, is the secret of all successful businesses."
That's proper like Brett Graham and Dodd stuff, really. It's like value investing
It is, isn't it?
a long time ago.
It is, yeah, in the 19th century.
Or Warren Buffett. She was a female Warren Buffett in some ways.
She was, absolutely.